out of the casualties, out of the deaths that occurred on the Israeli side, some of those we now know were Americans. And there is also a high probability, I think you could say at this point, that there are some American citizens who have also been taken hostage. Secretary of State Tony Blinken spoke about this on the Sunday shows. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
Several Americans may be among the dead. We are very actively working to verify those reports. Similarly, we've seen reports about hostages, and there again, we're very actively trying to verify them and nail that down.
Meaning that there could be some U.S. citizens who have been taken hostage as well, Mr. Secretary?
Yeah, so we got the report this morning, Krystal, of the official count is that at least 9 Americans were killed in Israel. Unfortunately, as you said, it's very likely that figure could go higher. And it's very likely there are also probably some citizens there. If anybody's ever been to Israel, there are Americans all over the place. There's a lot of people who also have dual citizenship. So it is not outside the realm of possibility to see anything like this. And the U.S. response now, so far, at least from what we can tell, in terms of the United States military, this is pretty significant. The U.S. aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald R. Ford, as well as all the other ships in the Carrier Strike Group 12, which include multiple cruisers, destroyers, and others, are now showing and heading towards the Eastern Mediterranean, quote, in a show of support for Israel and to assist with the possible evacuation of U.S. citizens should the needs of the country arises. Multiple other governments also mobilizing military resources towards the area in case they need to evacuate their citizens. Poland, I believe Romania, other places where they have a large dual citizen or population that lives there. On top of that, Krystal, in terms of the weapons requests, we haven't gotten specifics yet from Tel Aviv, but Washington has already begun discussions around shipping multiple more munitions to Israel, either restocking Iron Dome, ammunition. I expect a big, interesting discussion to probably occur. We had a massive stockpile of ammo actually in Israel, which was meant to either be released to the Israelis should the conflict arise, or should U.S. need access to that ammo, which is forward deployed in the Middle East. Well, we drew down a huge chunk of that and sent it to Ukraine. And I got to say this on the Israeli side, I hate to inject the Ukraine situation into this, but since we're now at least talking about response and all this, one of the reasons that Israel refused to ship a lot of munitions and arms to Ukraine is they were like, well, we might need it to defend ourselves. I think that they're probably very vindicated and validated in that decision. And it just goes to show you, in terms of trying to prioritize your own defense, you never know whenever you're going to have to try and have access to those. So just a little bit of an underscore for that. But that's the major, in terms of the U.S. response so far, that's basically been it. Lots of calls from the U.S. Secretary of State. He's had a call with Turkey. He had a call with, I believe, with some of the other, the Egyptians. Obviously, 2 calls now so far between President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu. But on the diplomatic side, it seems to be everybody's just sitting back and waiting to see what the hell happens.
Yeah.
Especially with Gaza and with the hostage situation. So as of right now, there's been no yet invasion of Gaza. Yeah. Ground invasion is what I'm talking about. There's been no U.S. troops or any of that been mobilized or sent as that we know. The only military response on our end so far is a symbolic show of force to the Eastern Med with the Carrier Strike Group 12.
But you have U.S. politicians who are calling for much, much more. Let's go ahead and put A9 up on the screen. This is this dude, Dean Phillips, who we talked about before. He's quote unquote moderate, problem solver, caucus type Democrat. He's the one you may recall who has been saying Joe Biden should receive a primary challenge. He's floated maybe he'll do it. So that's this dude. And I think he had to give up his committee assignments or something. He had some punishment. Out of Democratic leadership because daring to challenge Joe Biden.
Yes, that's right.
But now here he is calling for war with Iran. He says in response to a Wall Street Journal report that Iran helped to plot the attack on Israel over several weeks, which is what Hamas is saying. Iran is denying, and actually U.S. intelligence, as I mentioned before, says they have no evidence thus far, so we'll wait to see how all that shakes out. He says if this reporting that Iran helped plan, support, and initiate the attack on Israel is confirmed, principled nations of the world must unite and neutralize the most repugnant, repressive, destabilizing regime in the world. Evil cannot be appeased any longer. So sounds very much like he's calling for a war with Iran right now. Senator Lindsey Graham will surprise no one who knows his history of wanting a war with Iran for quite some time now, also jumping on that train and pushing in that direction, beating the war drums. there is going to be a lot of pressure coming from both parties in that direction. And, we'll wait and see what Israel's response is, which we really are only now just getting the contours of. Saagar, talk a little bit about what we were discussing earlier, how one of the great Israeli fears and part of what has led to them not going forward with a ground invasion of Gaza yet is because they're concerned about the possibility of a war on two fronts.
Yes, that's right. So the two-front war is probably the single biggest nightmare for Israeli war planners and for what a broader major escalation would look like. So we already know right now there have been some rockets that were fired by Hezbollah from Lebanon into Israel after the Hamas attack that happened on Israel. So that immediately ignited fears of, well, if we invade Gaza, we could then see another front open on our border with Lebanon. They have fought wars with both at the same time, or they have fought wars with both, but the idea of having to fight a full-scale invasion at the same time is the absolute nightmare, because that would obviously it would divide the number of reservists. It would also deplete the Iron Dome weapon stock munitions. And then in general, in terms of civilians getting caught in the crossfire, we have seen nightmares now in Israel, in Lebanon in the past, and in Gaza. So it could embroil. Lebanon, Hezbollah, of course, has got deep allies with the Iranian government. I haven't even mentioned Syria, which also has a significant Hezbollah situation. Who the hell knows whatever territory, is there on the ground with the Golan Heights. So they could even have, in some cases, two fronts, but with multiple other tertiary ones that could open up against them. It would also open the question of Saudi Arabian involvement, Emirati, Qatari, who all maintain relations with the Hamas government, but also have been previously trying to go with Israel. Part of the analysis I saw, actually from more hawkish people, is a guy, Seth Frantzman. I've followed him for a long time. He used to work over at the Jerusalem Post and others. He made a very interesting comment that other prime ministers would have invaded Gaza now at this point. They actually believe that Netanyahu is being much more cautious and has displayed some of this in the past. It doesn't jive with his rhetoric, I know, but I'm talking about at critical junctures in Israeli history. There was one scenario several years ago where Netanyahu traded like 1,000 Hamas prisoners in exchange for a single Israeli soldier who was taken captive, which is what reminded me of this hostage situation. There was a significant domestic support for that decision because they're like, we're sick of the death. We're sick of the carnage. We just want to live in some sort of peace. Now, that was a long time ago, but Netanyahu was the prime minister who was responsible for that decision. In terms of what we have right now, the siege, escalating it to not providing electricity, food, and water, that's certainly something. But that's not a full-scale ground invasion of Gaza, right? That would lead to hundreds of deaths, absolutely, on both, if not thousands, on both sides of the conflict. That has not yet happened, possibly because of the hostage situation, but also troop movements inside of Israel indicate they are sending almost as much armor to the Lebanese border as they are towards Gaza. And so the idea of the two-front escalation or any of that happening, well, the only benefit, I think, for the entire situation is it could give some sort of diplomacy a chance because Israel so desperately wants to avoid that to have to fight that two-front war, which I don't think there's any question that it would spiral into something. I'm not going to say it would draw us, fully into World War III, but yeah, already we've got calls to go to war with Iran. If we have a two-front war open up between Israel and Hezbollah and full-scale bombings and all that going on with Lebanon, and Hezbollah is not Hamas. They have far more advanced missile and rocket technology, which the Iranians have provided them. They could inflict a hell of a lot more damage onto Israel than Hamas has ever done. And so that is the other reason why they have such a nightmare scenario really on their hands. Again, we don't know what is going to happen. I mean, the situation right now is still very precarious. But as long as there's no ground invasion of Gaza, the idea of a two-front war opening up, remains at least remains lower. We also could see it's possible. It wouldn't be crazy, I think, for Israel to try and begin talks with Hezbollah or some sort of back channel with Iran or with any other places that have relations with them, where they might try and broker some agreement about, hey, we won't do anything here as long as we're doing everything here. But obviously, they would have to pay a price in terms of that. And I don't know what any of that would look like.
Yeah, Egypt is really trying to reassert their sort of traditional role as diplomatic go-betweens between the Palestinians and Hamas in particular, and Israel as other groups through the Abraham Accords and through, what the Biden administration is doing as well, like the UAE, have gained more prominence in terms of diplomatic ties with Israel. So there's just a lot of unanswered questions this morning. I also want to say, with regard to the videos that we're playing, just as a heads up,
Right.
we're doing the best we can to vet these videos. And actually, we're leaning more on quote unquote traditional news sources than perhaps we would, because there have been so many
Yes.
fake, wrong, inaccurate, old videos, information that's floating around. So, like I said, we're doing the best we can to sort through what is happening right now and bring you some visual elements so you can get a sense of what is happening on the ground. But I just want to throw in there that note of caution, because it's very difficult, especially now, to sort through what is fact and fiction, what is a real new video of something that happened on the ground, what is old. I even saw videos that were passing around that were from video games.
I know.
So, you know, it's difficult to parse through all of this. I just want to put that out there. And also, obviously, it's difficult to watch all of this unfold, both on the Israeli side and now with the retaliations, the brutal retaliations on Gaza. Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.